you, everyone. Welcome to the Committee of the Whole for Wednesday, August 23rd, 2023, Council Chambers. We would like to begin this meeting by acknowledging that we are gathered on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Inkakapa and Silk people. Just want to say welcome to everyone. I see we have two past councillors here tonight. We have Councillor Melvina and Councillor Travis, so thank you for coming. I appreciate you guys being here. Adoption of minutes. Committee of the Whole meeting minutes July 26, 2023. Recommendation that the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting be held on July 26, 2023 be adopted. Councillor Rogan, Councillor Etchart, any errors or omissions? Everything looks good. All those in favor? All those opposed? Carried. Thank you very much. General matters and delegations. We don't have any. Unfinished business, new business. Merritt Business Improvement Area Considerations, presented by Jeremy Heighton, Executive Director, Kamloops North Shore Business Improvement Association. Jeremy, if you come up, appreciate you being here because I've been wanting to hear this presentation for a while, so thank you.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming. I appreciate it.
Mayor and Council. My name is Jeremy Heighton. I'm the Executive Director of the Kamloops North Shore Business Improvement Association. I also am First Vice President on BIA's of BC's Board of Directors, sit on their Provincial Policy Recommendation Committee. I am a business consultant and in my spare time, well, I don't have any. I run a BIA in Kamloops, I guess. Thank you for having me here and giving me an opportunity to talk about business improvement areas. We have 80 BIAs in the province of BC, 70 of which are part of our organization, BIAs of BC. Some of the larger BIAs do not belong. They have an independent focus on some of the advocacy work and some of the things that they do. But generally speaking, the vast majority of BIAs work together in concert to try and advance a number of things. If we can go to the second slide, if that's possible. So really, the BIA in its under the community charter is sort of limited in what it can do. It can do, you know, community beautification. It can do some event stuff. It can do business promotion, etc. When I joined my BIA 5.5 years ago, my first question to my board was, do you want us to go with the status quo or do you want to be community leaders? And my board chose to be community leaders. So that means that we approach things in a slightly different lens than what's embedded in the community charter. We tend to be more community champions for, we were just talking about active transportation. We tend to be community champions for access for disabilities. We tend to work very closely with our economic development partners. So we're really involved in how do we bring the community forward as an entity, as a global cohort, if you would. And so for my BIA, what I found was after I joined the BIA BC Board of Directors, I discovered that almost all BIAs in BC have morphed. They've gone from what the traditional defined roles under the community charter are and have really become community leaders because we're boots on the ground. We're literally walking in and out of doors every single day. We're showing up for social disruption. We're being the interface between bylaws and RCMP in some cases. We are working on economic development. We're hosting events. We've got a very broad array of things that we offer. Really, it sort of comes down to these four key areas on the screen here. So economic development, community safety, promotion marketing, and future focusing. So individual voices quite often in a community, sometimes in a business community, are unheard or feel unheard. So it is an opportunity for the BIA to step into that space, to coalesce information, to talk about how we move forward, to build consensus, so that before things come into administration or come into council, they've been pre-worked, if you would, so that sort of a more formalized plan comes into council. This works really well when we work with our economic development arm. We're starting to talk about developers. We've got a couple of lots, for example, on the North Shore in Kamloops that local developers probably don't have deep enough pockets for. So instead of going to the development community, we go to our real estate partners and we go to some of our other partners across the country. We say, we're looking for a bigger developer. And then we bring that developer in and they meet with economic development, or we start talking about our vision for the community. So we really sort of help to drive some economic development on the ground level, not taking over the responsibility, but rather feeding into it to make sure that it is vibrant as it possibly can be in alignment with our community vision. The second piece that we do tend to spend a lot of time on, and I think every community across Canada, I was actually on a conference call with a group in Ontario, is community safety, social disruption, all of these types of, mental health, complex care, all those types of things. we found ourselves in an interesting role because we are boots on the ground. In Kamloops, we tend to respond the most quickly. We have a CAP team with the Downtown BIA, which is an ambassador program, which we'll be launching on our side of the river. But I get calls regularly, jump in my truck, go down the corridor, and help move people along from where they are, help people access outreach services. We're there every single day. So from a community safety point of view, we actually take a slightly different role. We are boots on the ground. We work with agencies all day long, but we also advocate to the provincial government through BIs of BC. And in fact, we also work closely with our city administration and council to help move forward on safety file as well. Because if community is in step with council, council's in step with sort of their federal and provincial counterparts, and we start to move into lobbying and advocacy, we have a greater chance of gaining traction. So as an example, I met with Eby 4 years ago, Premier Eby, when he was Attorney General. We were having a conversation about involuntary care as an example. Those words would not cross his lips. Nope, not going there. We're never going to go there. It isn't going to be a thing. And yet, just this spring, he's announced prolific offender strategies. He's announced the approach on, looking at how we do involuntary care for those people who can't care for themselves. He's looking at justice reform, and he's, written letters of direction to prosecutorial services. Now, I'm saying that I was responsible for that. I'm not saying BIABC was, but we were one of those many voices at the table that stepped in. We worked with the Urban Mayors Caucus. We worked with the Chamber of Commerce. We all worked together to advance a common agenda. Because this is the thing, is we're not at odds with each other. We should be in harmony with each other. We should be working forward together. So on the community safety file, we are very, very active. I sat on the committee provincially that negotiated the 10.5 Community Vandalism and Prevention Fund that the province announced about a month ago. We spent 9 months in the back room talking about the parameters of that project, how to put the money together. What does it look like from an application point of view? How do we move it forward? Those are examples of how BIAs get involved in community safety. We both look at the policy and the drivers, but also how do we deliver this on the ground in real time to our members, to our communities. The third piece that we do is promotion and marketing. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. How do we promote our communities? How do we get people to our events? How do we drive people into our businesses? How do we really make the community a more vibrant community? In the North Shore in Kamloops, it's kind of interesting because when you go back to sort of the founding of North Kamloops as a separate city, it was actually founded on multiculturalism. So we have people there from India, we have people there from Germany, we have people there from England, we have people there, from Italy, all over the world came to the North Shore because of its agricultural value, escaping poverty and looking at opportunity in Kamloops. So our mantra on the North Shore is we are a multicultural community, and we work very hard to embrace that. And as an example of that is next month we're hosting what's called the Tapestry Festival. It is a multicultural event that is actually bringing together hundreds of different cultural groups in one event opportunity. We'll pull 8,000 to 10,000 people into our McDonald Park on the North Shore, which of course will spill out into our neighboring business community, but also celebrates the multicultural aspect of who we are. So that sort of falls under that promotion and marketing. And then the fourth piece, I should say, and probably the most important piece, is future focusing. So quite often what we find from an administrative perspective is planning will want to do, your OCPs and, your master transportation plans, et cetera, et cetera. Before we even got to the rewrite of the North Shore Neighborhood Plan, which was due in 2018, it got delayed, of course, as these things do. We actually went out to our neighborhoods, to our members, to our entire community, of which 34% of Kamloops is made up in our catchment area. And we actually produced 111 things that the community wanted, distilled down to 34 projects. We fed those to the city. The city then launched their North Shore neighborhood planning process. And in every conference call we attended, all of those things that we identified kept coming up. So the community was on side. The city was on side. The BIA helped to facilitate that conversation. And so we have a new North Shore neighborhood plan. As a part of that plan, we will have a 10-year revitalization project moving forward on the Tronquil Corridor in the North Shore. We've just secured this spring a North Shore neighborhood revitalization program called the Public Realm Improvement Fund, which will be $250,000 a year over 5 years coming out of our gaming grants. And we are working forward in our community. And what happens is our community sees where we're going. They understand who we're trying to become. And that is very powerful. Because when we start to go out and we start to talk about where we're going, as long as we have the boots on the ground and as long as we start to realize the goals, there's credibility in that. And that credibility comes back in social discourse and conversation. It comes back in public engagement and all those other types of things that you as council will be, sort of undertaking with your community. But we in the BIA are partners in that process. We're not there to complain. We're not there to undermine. We are there to work together to build a better community. It harkens back to my days with the federal government. I used to be a communications officer with DFO many, many years ago. And one of my greatest frustrations is that almost all political mandates are 3 years in duration. Even though they're 4, they're 3. Because 6 months before an election, you stop doing stuff. Because you don't upset the apple cart. You have an election, new people get involved. 6 months after the election, you're learning about the role, trying to get your feet under you. You have 3 years to get some stuff done before you have to go back to electorate again. With a future focus, I can say in 20 years, we want our community to become this. So I can work between the political lines. I can pick up the phone and call our MLA, or I can call the Premier's office. I can call my mayor, or I can call my MP. It doesn't matter because I'm neutral. I'm not political. I'm building community. And that is a strong value of BIAs. We attack the problems, we look for solutions, but we look beyond the short-term myopic into how do we build a better tomorrow for the whole community. We can actually flip 2 slides if you would. There's a triangle, that one, yeah. So this is how a BIA typically operates. So this is the North Shore Business Improvement Association. At the top of the pyramid are our members. So we have 423 business owners and 299 property owners that we represent on the North Shore of Kamloops. The approximate valuation of the properties is $297 million. Our annual levy this year is $245,000. That's what our levy amount is. For our members, we actually do 2 things. Number one is we provide advocacy. We talk about policy. We applied for a federal infrastructure grant twice before the city applied for it because the city wasn't prepared to go there. So we said, we're just going to do it. And of course we got denied. And then we did it again and got denied. And then I phoned Dave Trowan, CAO, and I said, we got denied, Dave. Can the city maybe pick this up? And he did. They picked it up and then they actually got the infrastructure grant. That project starts on the 5th of September. It's $1 million project. So we go after infrastructure. We look for opportunities to build our community. We find ways to move forward on the agenda. I'm actually on the alternate transportation committee with the city that was just announced, and we are active in, how do we maximize parking? How do we maximize alternate transportation methods? How do we connect community? How do we get people out of their cars? All of those kind of questions all drive vibrancy to our commercial sectors. And then we also do a lot of work around culture and arts. So we are always working with partners to try and find ways to celebrate who we are as a community and look at the multicultural fabric and texture of who we are. We all come from somewhere else. We all come from somewhere else. And so we need to embrace that concept culturally because we all have something to offer to the depth of our community. On the other side, there's a lot of awareness. This is the promotion, marketing, events, and public relations that we do. We do a lot of it every year. Our member mixers typically draw 50 to 75 business leaders every month. Our U Street closure this year, which is one of our events, drew about 3,500 people to U Street. It was only a partial road closure. Overlanders Day, which we just completed in July, drew 7,000 people. We had 100 business and nonprofit exhibitors to that event. And our Tapestry, which is next month, we expect will draw somewhere between 3,000 and 5,000 people. And all of these are opportunities to not just highlight our community, but also our members, which is a tremendous piece of traction for them. So members, we do awareness. Awareness drives into community. Community and our members together are sort of pinned with the government piece. So the government piece is kind of interesting because we have two roles here. Number one is we often will lobby to government on behalf of community and our members because a lot of our needs are synergist. So, you know, we want safer streets, the community wants safer streets. We want better alternate transportation, the community wants better alternate transportation. So we work very, very harmoniously to make sure we're lobbying to government, but then also that we're bringing back government policies to community and to our members as well, to make sure that we understand these are the rules that we're operating in. This is how it functions. And so sometimes for a BIA, because we're a neutral facilitator, if we would, of conversation, we have an opportunity to educate the government doesn't have, right? Because we have that neutral position. We say, these are the rules. This is where you want to go. This is how we envision you could get there. So we actually can build some consensus for government as well. So we sort of work in a big circle, and we work together harmoniously with our community. And what's interesting is we don't just work with our community, we also work, there's a secondary BIA downtown. I had a coffee with him, Howie Reimer from the downtown BIA today. I also had Keisha Pangelina from the Chamber of Commerce there with me today. We're actually launching a community impact survey. We do it every year in the North Shore, but we're launching it across the city, cross agency, because we see the value of working together to collaborate, to maximize efficiency, to maximize the effectiveness of funding, and to ensure that we're all moving in the same direction as a community. It's really, really important to us. So collaboration is extremely high on our agenda. It's not about egos, it's about mandates. How do we move forward, and how do we move forward together? So there's some things that we need to think about, and so this is the next slide, if you would. So there's things that we need to think about before we move into a BIA. And I love the BIAs because I think they're tremendously powerful, but there's some questions. So what are the key issues the BIA will overcome for you? Are there issues that are actual issues, or there's issues pointing to a deeper systemic need in the community? Quite often when we get into looking at, things pop up all over the place. Is that really what's going on, or is there something deeper going on that we need to look at systemically before we sort of, build new structures? Look at what's already there. Does it fit? So looking at how other organizations service this community, how does a BIA fit within that landscape? What is the role of tourism? What is the role of economic development? What is the role of the chamber, and what's the role of the BIA? What you want to build is a system that doesn't compete with itself, that works well in harmony with itself. So the clarity of roles, responsibilities, and outcomes is critical. Everybody needs to understand what they're there to do and then work together to do that. So if, for example, tourism is drawing people to the community, maybe the chamber is doing events, and maybe the BIA is helping with licensing and policy development. How do we fit together? What are our roles? How do we work together? That will be a critical question because you have a very small business community here, 500 businesses approximately in the area. Your tax roll is small. Your money is tight. How do you make sure you're doing the most you can with that money? Not building competition, building harmony. It's a critical question to move forward on. And then the last one is consideration of protocols. So ensuring that the alignment of the BIA fiscal cycle lines up with the city's taxation cycle. So for example, we are starting a new BIA potentially in Valley View and Dallas. I'm helping the steering committee with that one. And so one of the questions we were talking about is how we fund this. When do we incorporate? How do we fund it? The tax levy wouldn't be collected until July, so we can't start running it in March because there's no money there. Where does the money come from? So we have to align things so they fit, but then we also have to consider what the financial reporting side of the BIA is as well. So for us, our fiscal year end is November 30th. We have a financial process that takes us through till about February 15th. February 15th, we get our financial reports from our auditor. We send those to the city. They line up with our financial process and the 50% levy release from the city in March. And then if we have an audit process, we have until July 15th to have the full audit done. We do an audit every 4 years. So we have a full audit that can be done, and that lines up with the July levy release. So it's all tied together linearly from a fiscal perspective to make sure that it works for everybody from a funding and from an operational point of view. So there are other systems that need to be considered as well, such as, Societies Act reporting and, taxation and CRA stuff and all that kind of stuff. But really, aligning it to the municipality's tax levy process is probably the most critical piece to ensure that the funds flow appropriately so you're not front loading your BIA before you have the money to actually pay for it. So that's sort of the real super nutshell. I work better on Q&As, so please ask me any questions you may have.
Thank you for that input. And I've been a big proponent of our community having a BIA or a business association. We kind of had one start up and then it kind of fell apart, but I think it makes your community stronger and they can speak with one voice rather than a fractured voice. North Cam, or you're on the North Shore, where do you start and where do you finish? Like, where do you cover? I don't think you go all the way out to the airport, do you?
We do.
Oh, you do?
We include the Golf and Country Club.
Okay.
And we go all the way over to the North Thompson.
Okay.
And from Ord Road all the way down to the river.
Oh,
so we have 6 sub-districts within our BIA catchment.
Okay.
And the catchment, if you would, from a residential perspective, is 34% of the city because we also pull in West Side, Bachelor Heights, Brocklehurst, North Kamloops. So all of those areas fall within our catchment. So it was interesting because when we amalgamated the cities in 72, many people on the North Shore still felt like they were a separate city. They didn't feel like they were connected well to the city. So we've really sort of stepped into that space and tried to find ways to work across the river with Howie Downtown, with other organizations to make sure that we're part of a bigger whole, a bigger connective.
Let's see who the winner is here. Councillor Charney.
That was an excellent report. It was very interesting.
Thank you.
You pointed out one of the concerns I have. We are a very small business community, and I was wondering how it's going to work with the Chamber of Commerce, and if we do have a downtown business association, will there be overlap? And how do you garner interest in this? I don't know if this was put out to all businesses, but we don't have very many businesses in attendance here. So how do we go about getting the enthusiasm of businesses to participate?
Impact, relevance, and return on investment. So number one is, what are the impact you want to have? What is your goal? What is your mandate? What are you there to do? Relevance, how relevant is it to your operation, to bringing your customers, to moving forward on policy with provincial or federal governments? And then return on investment, how much you putting into the pot, how much you getting out of the pot? Those are the questions that we really have to ask. So I agree. So as I'm sitting thinking about this is exactly why I'm thinking, how does it fit? So for example, if you had the 4 organizations, assuming you had a BIA, and you had a chamber, and you have ACTEV, and you have tourism, and you bring them all to the room, you say, okay, tourism, what is it you do? What are you doing for us? We're going to draw people into the community. That's what we're going to do. Fantastic. That's your lane. Economic development, what are you going to do? We're going to work on investors, and we're going to work on property valuation. We're going to work on all these, great stuff from the ACTEV. Chamber, what are you doing? Well, my understanding, and I could be wrong, so please, don't kill me, but the chamber, to my understanding, is largely attuned to some of the event stuff that's going on in the community. Fantastic. So let's just assume the chamber does the event stuff. So then the BIA maybe becomes the policy arm, right? Maybe they look at community safety and some of the other stuff that you do, and they work with all of the partners on marketing. So you build sort of a structure, a system, so that there is no toe stepping. Instead, there is harmony and you come together on a regular basis. I mean, you look at the Chamber of Commerce and the BIAs in Kamloops, technically we compete, right? The Chamber is voluntary, the BIA is involuntary from a yearly renewal perspective, right? But that doesn't stop us from working together. In fact, it actually encourages us to work together because we have greater depth and greater ability to execute as a community because we're collaborating. So we have to be really careful about building the right structure, knowing what our lanes are, and then figuring out how to collaborate, put egos aside, and focus on community and building community.
So what you're saying is that everyone has their role.
Yeah.
We're not commingling, and we work cooperatively in our own roles for the future development.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And that seems to be working in North Shore.
Yeah, North Shore and downtown. So Downtown Kamloops and the North Shore have been frenemies for many, many years, right? We collaborate every once in a while. We beat each other up every once in a while. When Howie joined about 18 months ago, I took Howie for lunch. I said, look, we need to build. We need to build together, and what's bothering your members is bothering my members, right? We need to work across the river more fully. So I actually have a program called the Clean Team. So the Clean Team is actually composed of people who are in housing or in mental health care who are trying to get back on their feet. So our agencies are our partners. They are our employers. We're the director of work. We take them out. We do garbage cleanup. We do graffiti removal. We take care of our neighborhoods. So we built this program over the last year and a half. And Howie downtown has the CAP team. It's a community ambassador program. So it's kind of tourism. It's kind of community safety. Well, I don't want to build a CAP team over on my side, and Howie doesn't want to build a clean team on his side, so we exchange service. So Howie provides 2 CAP team members to the North Shore. I provide a clean team to the downtown. We work together so we each know what we're best at, what we're good at, and what we're most efficient at, and then we share the resources together to make sure that we do the most we can with the minimum amount of impact and economic challenge. So we work very closely on that. And then Acacia from the Chamber, I actually sat on the Chamber board for 6 years. So Acacia and I have known each other for a long, long time. So yeah, it's a little more competitive, but like I say, today we were meeting around our impacts community safety survey, and they're going to send it out to their members. We're sending out to our, like we're working together on things where we can work together because we see the value in that synergy, and our council does too. You know, when I go and I meet with counselors, you know, we have coffee with the boys, you know, like a couple of us get together and have coffee. They know that I've already talked to Howie downtown. I've already talked to Acacia. I've already talked to Rose at CHB, whatever. And we're talking about things we want to do as a community. So it really creates some very strong opportunities for the community to come together outside of agendas and inside of intent, inside of opportunity.
Councillor Petrosi.
We used to live in Kamloops, actually West Side, and we moved away in 2005. And to drive the North Shore now, it's beautiful.
It's coming.
It's coming.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to mention that 34%.
Yeah. The city's population.
Right. Okay. And so did you send a survey out for priorities at the public?
Yeah.
Okay.
So so in 2018, I sent a big survey out, and we actually did a number of open houses as a BIA. Because we really wanted to understand, and it was my first year in the role, so I really wanted to get a sense for it. Because the reality is we often think of business and residential as separate entities. They're not. If we do a great job of servicing our residential customers, they come to our commercial corridors. And our commercial corridors in turn serve our community. We sponsor teams, we get involved in arts, we have events, like we work together. So what's good for one is good for both, right? So we do that. And that was really important to us. But then we also sort of follow that process all the time. Like we're always thinking every year, for example, in November, I send out a community survey to the residences and say, what do you need on the commercial corridors? And then we do a survey, and they send us back all sorts of information. And then I send that out to the development community. Right now, maybe here, because of the tightness of rules, we'd send it to ECDEV to say, this is what the residents are telling us they need in our commercial zones. So let's find a way to make that happen, right? So we can act as sort of that conduit to bring information. And if we do it well, we work with, you know, the chamber, for example, and a BIA, suddenly you're hitting, you know, everybody on different scales, right? So you can pull all that information together and create a common footprint moving forward. Right. So we're very much so on within the radar of our neighborhood. We include the neighborhood associations on our committees. We include social agencies on our board. Like, we want to be part of the community. We want to understand what's happening in the community because we are not separate from community. We are part of the texture and the fabric of our community.
Okay. So there were 100 and some priorities that the public saw, and then you whittled it down to 37
common.
So who whittled it down? Your member? You did. Okay.
No, I did. So basically, it was a raw data process. So we pulled 100, I think it was 111. I think is what it was. But basically they were all project, and this is my background. My background is system design and organizational leadership. So I pull all the raw data and I'm like, oh, so what are the common points on these, right? Because quite often, as I said earlier, the issue is not the issue. The issue is a symptom of an issue, right? So what you do is you pull enough data and you go, oh, the actual issue is this. So what we were able to do is take the 111 project ideas and distill them down to 37 key aspects. And then those 37 we fed to the city, who then launched the North Shore Plan. They had this document, but they didn't use that as a base. But then when we started having the open houses of which we were a stakeholder, that's what we kept hearing at all the stakeholder meetings, is all the same stuff. And I mean, at one meeting, my president and I turned to each other like, yeah, we hit it, right? We hit it right on the mark. Right. So it's really about listening to the community and understanding what they need and then trying to build the bridge, right? So that we can service most effectively. Because here's the other thing is that if you have a leader without a vision is not a nice walk. A leader with vision has purpose, right? They really understand where they're going. And what happens is as you move to that purpose, you actually create momentum. And as you create momentum, more people want to come into that parade. More people want to be involved in that process. So the better job you do of collecting the data, listening to the people, creating the vision, the more people will come. And to your point earlier, we have 11 buildings going in on the North Shore in the next 18 months. We are working on 5 more major properties. One of them is a $9 million buy-in just to get the property up to speed. Yeah. So there's a lot of stuff going on, but we've got momentum because we've got the passion, we've got the vision. We know where we're taking the neighborhood, and the neighborhood's coming there with us because they see where we're trying to go.
Right, right.
There's tremendous power in that.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway, great job.
Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Ogun.
Thank you so much, Jeremy, for the information that you presented. So as part of my research, I contacted a few people, and I talked to Keisha after your meeting with her from the Chamber of Commerce in Kamloops. I talked to Shelley from the Chamber of Commerce in Salmon Arm. So, and it's clear that, yes, in order to make something like this work, it needs to be a clear understanding of who is doing what. Because there is going to be an overlap. So like Jeremy says, so one organization is going to be doing something, the other organization is going to be something. That doesn't work like that. So there's going to be different priorities, different strategies or mandates that every organization will be delivering. So they have to be a very clear organization. One of the biggest challenges based on these conversations I had with this Chamber of Commerce is that was not clear enough. So now it has got to a better spot, but it was not clear a few years back. So there was a little bit of conflict, understanding who is going to be doing what. So my question to you, Jeremy, it's about the working relationship between your organization with Kamloops Tourism, with the city of Kamloops, with the Chamber of Commerce, and you forgot to mention community features, which also delivers and community economic development role in Kamloops. So what is the working relationship that you have right now in Kamloops?
It's a simple question with a complex answer, to be quite honest with you. So with the Chamber of Commerce, for example, when we were working on the community safety file, I knew that Acacia and the BC Chamber were working on similar files on the community safety side. So I would actually pick up the phone quite regularly and send materials over to Acacia to feed her policy committee as well. And I also met with her chair of her policy committee on a number of occasions to make sure that we were also sort of going, again, in lockstep, right? Because there are different policy processes. We have different access points to the provincial government than the Chamber does, but that's not actually a problem. That's actually a blessing. It's just like, when you talk about, in Kamloops, we don't have any sitting ministers, but in Vancouver, there are sitting ministers. So we can push the same agenda on both sides of the aisle. Similarly, the Chamber's network is set up with certain individuals that they work with on a regular basis. So is BIABC. So as long as we're in harmony, we actually can hit more points of the government working together on policy. So with Acacia, we do that quite frequently. Acacia also has her own stuff that she does that's specific to her members. Again, we have a bigger depth of membership in Kamloops, which allows for that. Here, you'd have to be a little tighter. You'd have to be a little more cautious about moving into that space and ensuring that everybody had a lane to run in appropriately. And then ultimately, one of the questions when you start talking about, staffing levels and, is it a full-time equivalent? Is it a part-time equivalent? Maybe there's opportunities there to start looking at how those work together. And maybe there are a couple of mechanisms that can come together to create a fuller, more service-based outcome. for the whole community. Maybe it's 2 part-timers, maybe it's a part-timer and a full-timer. Right? It's the system is the critical piece, how it fits together. Once you define that, everything else goes forward. And like I say, BC Chamber, BIABC, Urban Mayors Caucus, we all went to the government with the same stuff. When the Mayors Caucus got the pushback and were asked for data to prove that there was an issue with repeat prolific offenders, we couldn't believe it. We've been talking about it with government for a year and a half. We showed them the stats. The mayors actually came back out to their cities and said, hey, what kind of work have you guys all done? And we all collected data and fed it up to the Mayor's Caucus. And the Mayor's Caucus presented that information to EB. And of course, that's where some of the current iterations of programming are coming from. But we all work together. And this comes back to the same thing. We are here to build community. And community is a 20-year vision. It's not a 3-year political mandate. So we work across those mandates. My BIA is non-political. We don't endorse, we don't encourage. In fact, we don't even hold a candidates forum. The chamber does that. That's their role. We support it, we feed in questions to it, absolutely. But we are really careful about not getting into the politics because we don't want it to be agenda-driven. We want it to be community-driven. So we all work very, very tightly on that concept to ensure that we're moving forward. The chamber is a little bit more of a political agenda, but that's just the nature of how they've evolved over the years. We're very neutral. We want to be very neutral. It's very important to us.
I will ask one more question, and if I have time after the Councillor HR, so I will ask more questions. So,
oh, yeah, sure.
My next question is about revenue streams. So you mentioned taxation, right? So is there any other revenue stream for the BIA?
Oh, yeah. So we as an organization go out and pursue grants, just like most nonprofits. We are a nonprofit under the Societies Act. So we have a levy, which is a core budget. We have, we go out community arts grants for events or, that type of thing. Or we'll look like the federal infrastructure grant, right? We actually failed twice as we should have because it wasn't our property to actually go for the grant on. But then the city got it, but we were an endorser of the project, right? So we will work with others to try and find grant dollars to bring in as well. We have 2 contribution agreements with the city right now. So our clean team actually is under 2 contribution agreements with the city. So there's various ways that we fund our organization. And like everything else, as we start moving forward and continue to grow, we've only been in the role 5 years, as we continue to grow the organization, we will continue to pursue other opportunities to fund. The North Shore Public Realm Improvement Fund is a very interesting one. The monies are technically held by the city. We are the adjudicator, but we are also asking both ourselves and our partners to find alternate funding as well. So to leverage funding coming in so we have more leverage for community going out. So we're very conscious, I'm very conscious of the fact that we can't rely on our core levy. We have to look at alternate streams. We have to look at service provision. We have to look at how we're serving our community and ultimately how that becomes a revenue stream, just like any business. A business that only sells eggs is going to have a real problem if all the chickens die. Right? But a diversified business has multiple income streams. And so it's really important to not get into that complacent world of non-profiteering where you have one stream, and if that one stream fails, where do we go from here? You have to think about it in a more diversified manner. So that's what we do. I know that Howie's doing that downtown as well. I can't speak to Acacia right now because we haven't dug into that. That's sort of her thing, and that's part of our competitiveness, right? But I know that she is pursuing alternate funding from commercial endorsements, like commercial partners for the year and those types of things. We don't go down that way. We actually have sponsors for events, as an example. So it's a slightly different pot. But we're all looking at how we diversify most effectively.
Councillor Richard.
My main question that I was wondering about was funding, which you just basically answered. Right now, in being the smaller community with volunteers and business owners and whatnot, even the chamber to operate is just getting back operationally over the last few years. So how do you see that working for a small community? Like, do you work a lot with other small communities like Chase or anything, or?
Not yet. I worked a little bit with Chase when I was actually at the chamber on the board, and we tried to do some stuff. The There's a couple of things to consider, and one is capacity in the community, right? I mean, community capacity for volunteerism is a huge challenge.
Yeah.
So where, for example, we have 12 directors on a board, maybe you only put 6 on a board. Maybe you only have 4 on a board. Maybe you have an executive board, right? Under the Societies Act, you can have a core functioning board, right, with a president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer. Maybe that's all you put. So from a volunteerism, you have to look at it strategically and say, what do we want to do? Who do we want to drive this organization? How does it look? From a bigger perspective and capacity and numbers of businesses, again, what's the lanes? How do you fit together? What does the funding strategy look like? If you were to put a BIA in and it maybe threatens the chamber's viability, are there opportunities for the chamber to then look at some contribution agreements or some other opportunities for funding that the BIA can support? Like, how do we come together to figure out how to create the most vibrancy? Everybody has a role. Let's be honest with you. I can totally see where the lines would fit, but those people running those organizations have to want to work together.
Yeah.
They have to want to be synergists. It can be done, but it's a strategic action. Does that give you enough? You need more?
I'll just listen to more later.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. No worries.
So my question is, we'd be starting from scratch. So tell
Yep.
me how that looks. How do you start from nothing to get to something? How do we go about that, get the buy-in, and get people excited about it?
So I've been working with the East Kamloops BIA steering committee for 4 months now. So step number 1 is to do some door knocking, right? Do some canvassing, understand what's going on. Where do you think gaps currently exist? If we were to move forward with an organization like this, would it fit? How does it fit together? So you actually have to get people to have a glimmer of interest. Then what we did with the East Kamloops BIA is we actually held a series of meetings. Very similar, actually, slides are very similar to this, actually. This is based on the slides. So we held an information meeting with businesses, and we said, this is where we're going, this is what we're doing. I mean, one of the first questions, and it was interesting, it sort of comes to your point, one of the questions we heard in the first meeting was, well, it's going to cost me like $800 a year for the BIA. I don't know if I can afford that. And so the response to that is, well, I get where you're coming from, but if you spend $800 in a month on marketing, let's just assume you put an ad campaign on the radio, you put something in the newspaper, you spend $800. 30 days later, it's gone. If you have a BIA and marketing is part of its key aspect, you get 12 months of marketing. You maybe have a leveraged radio package, or maybe you have a page in the paper, or you have social media posts, you have Instagram, like all these things. And so my marketing and PR gal puts out 28 to 30 posts a day, every single day for our members. Every single day. So she's really in the marketing stream. So what does your $800 get you? It gets you thousands of posts over the course of the year, potentially, for your membership, right? So you have to think about funding in a different parameter. It's not just about cost, it's about return on that investment. What are you getting for that dollar? So for us, with the clean team, I've actually gone back to membership a number of times now and said, to keep this running properly, we need to embed it in our new levy. And my members are like, sure. We've collected 7,000 kilograms of trash in the first 7 months of this year. We've returned $8,000 worth of shopping carts. We've picked up literally thousands of pieces of harm reduction materials. Like, you start to talk about those kind of impacts in community, there's a return on the investment. So that's where you have to get to. You have to get to, everybody has to understand, what is our value to the community? What is the return on investment for having us here? And here's the thing, one of my axioms of business, perception of value is more important than the price. Nobody will debate the cost of a BMW if they want a BMW. Never do. Luxury is the only category which doesn't suffer in recessionary times, because there's a perception of value which supersedes the price of that good or service. Now, I'm not saying you have to build the Cadillac of service, but you have to be able to say, this is worth it, and here's why. And as soon as you can create that perception of value, like my member said, we're in. We are in. We see the value of doing this, so we will increase your levy next time. So it's all about creating those synergies and ensuring that people are getting what they pay for. And in fact, getting more than what they pay for is critically important. Perception of value is more important than the price every day.
Councillor Charney.
You just mentioned a number, but I was wondering, what would be the cost for a business to become a member?
So again, it depends on the tax levy, it depends on the budget. So the way the system works, it's kind of complicated, but it's not actually. So the way the system works right now is you have to set a cents per $1,000, cents per $10,000 levy valuation to start. And then each of the next years have to have a whole dollar value in your bylaw. Realistically, I work it backwards. I say, so what do we want to do? How much is it going to cost? How does that break out into a levy? How many members we have? So it might be $600, it might be $1,200. It depends what you want to do from a service perspective, right? And how much depth you have in your business community. And so that has to be determined before you move forward. Yeah, you can probably make it work with 500-ish businesses in the area, but then what are you doing? How much money does that cost? What does that look like? Because if you determine what you're doing, you determine what you're staffing. You determine what you're staffing, you determine what you're, like it all plays together, right? So the question comes back. If you only want this suite of services, is that a full-time equivalent? Or is that a part-time equivalent, right? If that, if you want this service, is that taken care of by the chamber who's got voluntary membership and maybe there's an alternate funding offer? Like, you have to start asking some more critical questions. It's not just about the dollar. It's about what you're trying to deliver and then how you fund that. So you sort of have to work backwards. So our next levy, I know it's all public knowledge. So our next levy, I'm going for about a $35,000 to $40,000 lift per year in our global budget, because we want to fund the clean team. And our members have already told us they're in to fund the clean team. So if we're going to add 6 more staff, right? Partly with government support and all that kind of stuff, then this is what it costs. Do you want it? Yes, no, yes, okay, good, this is what it costs. No, okay, good, this is what we're gonna do. You gotta sort of figure out where you're going with the program. The reality is your biggest single cost will be staffing. It's just the nature of the beast. So the question is, who do you want in the role? What kind of qualities do they exhibit? What kind of an individual are they? How do they solve problems? Are they a collaborator? Are they altruistic? What kind of person? And then you need to go out to your community and say, this type of person, A, do they exist here? B, what's that person's typical wage? Or C, if they don't exist here, what do we need to pay to draw them here? It is a critical question. My board and I are talking about it right now. We do a lot of succession planning for my board and also for myself and Patty in case I get hit by a bus or who knows what happens, right? And this is always the question. Like, the board keeps coming back and they're like, so what are your salary expectations? And I always come back, because I'm a consultant and an entrepreneur in my core nature, I always come back with, who do you want to replace me with? I don't care about me. Who do you want to replace me with? That's who we need to set the budget for, because that's who we need to attract. The right person in the right role is worth every penny. Perception of value, critically important. So I can't give you a number because I don't have one, because we don't know enough yet. I can tell you that based on what I've seen, you should be able to fund it. To what level? What salaries? How many staff? That's another question that we can't yet answer.
Councillor Hogan.
Yeah, so respectfully, I feel like we have to determine if there is a need of a BIA first. So let's talk about facts here.
Yep.
So our population, based on the last census, is 7,051 here in Merritt. So what do we have already here in Merritt? So tourism, Nicola Valley, community features, Nicola Valley, Chamber of Commerce, and we have the city economic development as well. So I feel like there should be a clear direction of what everyone is doing right now, which we haven't had. At least that's how I feel. So if we were able to put those lines to determine who's going to be working on that, may not be a need of the BIA. So the BIA, we don't have the resources to have staff. The Chamber of Commerce, it's runs by only volunteer people, so trained to volunteer their time. So they are doing their best, but they have not received any support from anywhere else, right? So that's only the members. So those are the how I feel. So I feel like if we are able to make those, let's say, memorandum of understanding between these organizations to understand who is going to be doing and what's going to be your mandate, and work together, with the other organizations. I just want to mention as well that we had business walks. We have already had the business walks. The first one, when I was working for the local community feature offices, we handled the first one, and after that, the city did. We have a tourism downtown assessment made by Roger Brooks already, in which all those things, items that came up. So how many have been implemented? So it's just a minority, right? So maybe 1, 2, or 3. What happened with the other 17 items that are on that list? And that was something that the local community features paid to have that assessment. So I'm all for, for exploring other opportunities to support the community. I feel like at this time, so there should be all these existing organizations should receive the support that they need to provide those results.
Yeah, totally agree. So yeah, Community Futures, I've been involved with them for a long time. I actually taught their self-employment program for a number of years. I currently lecture on their taking care of business side as well. They are largely funded by Pacific Can, right? So they're funded by federal and some provincial dollars. The chamber is, of course, funded by voluntary membership, totally. So it's a different beast, a little bit of a different beast. The BIA, theoretically, the only mechanism to fund the BIA is under the community charter. And with tourism, usually that's a, MRMT, is that right? The room tax. I'm not sure the terminology, but the room tax process. And then ACDEV, of course, is a municipal branch, if you would. So everybody has, in some ways, a separate funding source. But I agree with you, and that's point number one on here. Is it required? Like, how does it fit into the metric of what you're trying to build in your community? And I'll say this, and I'm being a bit glib, but so please don't, is the chamber the mechanism you need right now, or is the BIA the mechanism you need right now? I'm not judging either way. I'm saying, what is the mechanism you need to get the most traction? Because here's the other thing: is if you run an organization on volunteer hours, then volunteer hours tend to be finite. Right, that you end up with competing priorities or other things happen. It's just the nature of the beast. It's the nature of nonprofits. Volunteerism is a finite resource, whereas a BIA, because it's funded, is less finite. It still has a limitation, but it has more robustness. So then the question is, do you now fund a chamber instead? Instead of a BIA, do you fund a chamber? Can't answer that question. That's your question to answer, to be honest with you. But you're hit on a good point, is because volunteerism can only go so deep. And it's the conundrum that we're seeing in Rotaries and all these nonprofit organizations around the world who run on volunteerism. They're having a hard time attracting people because there's so much demand for volunteerism. So if you can't get people to volunteer, then my way of thinking, you have to look at a different way to do it. Right? What's the other mechanism you can use? And so that's where I sort of have this philosophical conversation back and forth. Is it a chamber? Is it a BIA? Either one's the right answer. It's about what you need and about what you want. I'm not here to wave the flag and say the BIA is the only way. I've been doing this way, way too long. I'm here to say whatever works for you, there is a solution. If the BIA is part of it, we will help you get it done. No questions. If the BIA is not part of it, I'll still help you get some work done. Like I'm good with that. I'm good with that. But we need to figure out what the lines are. We need to figure out how it gets together, and then we need to figure out how to fund everything to make sure that you get maximum efficiency. Truthfully, I'm a taxpayer. I get it. I don't want to pay any more tax than I have to, right? Like, let's be honest. So let's make good use of what we have.
So thank you, Jeremy. Thank you. Any other questions? Oh.
Was that close?
I don't know if this is just ridiculous, but is it possible to combine two groups, the BIA with either the tourism or chamber?
They both operate under, well, each of them operates under a unique mandate. The chamber and the BIA are the closest to each other. What varies is the BIA is legislated under the community charter, whereas the chamber is not. The chamber is an independent body. Now, there are advantages to that. it being an independent body, again, apolitical. You don't, sing to any piper. We are very clear under the BIA, even though we're enacted under the community charter. I say to my directors, I meet with directors of the city all the time, I'll always be open, I'll always be honest, I'll always be tactful, but I won't always agree with you. So you need to understand that going into the conversation. I'm going to advocate for what community needs. I'm going to do it respectfully, but your agenda is not my agenda. And so we actually, in my BIA, we've actually defined roles for liaisons to the city. So we have an administrative liaison and we have a council liaison that sits on our board, and they are non-voting. All of their roles and responsibilities are clearly defined in policy because we're very cautious about the separation between government and the BIA. The government, to our way of thinking, is the funding mechanism. And that's it. That's where it stops. So we really have to think in those terms. The chamber is truly neutral. It is driven by business. But the question is there enough revenue, voluntary revenue, in your business community to run a paid chamber to do what you need to do? It's a big question. If there is not, and you can get consensus to go down the BIA road, that would be funded. It'd be funded for a 5-year period. Maybe you pilot it. Maybe you put it in for a 3-year period. Instead of doing a 5-year window, do it for a 3-year window. Give it a shot and see what happens. If you get the right person in the door, they'll be able to sell it at the end of 3 years, right? It really comes down to where are you going as a community? How are you building that? How are you, what's the vision here? And how do we help you get there? Because business is not divorced from community. We are synergists. We work together. We must work together to build a better community. So where's that community going to be? What's it going to look like? How's it going to fit together? How do we fund it? Super great questions. I don't have the answers to them yet.
Thank you.
No worries. I'm trying to be honest here, right? I could be here and I could like do the parade, but that's not what you need.
Councillor Hogan.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate your honesty. I appreciate the information that you are providing. When I talked to Acacia, so she mentioned all your experience with Chamber of Commerce, and that's why I need to ask you this. So, how often municipalities have funded their local Chamber of Commerce by providing either a percentage of the business license or any other type of revenue from the municipality?
Yeah, so those mechanisms can exist. We've actually talked about them on the BIA side as an alternate revenue stream as well with our CAO. We chose not to go that way, but there are a number of mechanisms that can be used because it's not as controlled by the community charter. There is more flexibility. So when I first took over so I'll give you a little bit of a background. So when I first took over the BIA in 2018, my predecessor had overspent by $16,000. We had no contingency money left in the budget. And I made first payroll on Visa. So within a week, I'm on the phone to the CAO. Let's be honest. I'm like, holy crap, we're in trouble here, right? And so we explored some of those options, right? Those are mechanisms that do exist that the community, that the city can put into play to fund it. We chose not to go there. Now as a BIA, I have $150,000 today in the account to carry me over to my first levy payment next fiscal year. We have $15,000 in contingency. We're very robust. We have 7 staff. We've come a long way in 5 years, but it's been strategic. I chose not to go down that alternate funding road. I chose instead to look at, partnership agreements and contribution agreements and other ways to fund it. But there are mechanisms the city can use to fund the chamber, but you have to be really careful about how far down that road you go, because you also don't want to be seen as the driver of the chamber. The chamber needs to have some level of autonomy if they're going to advocate appropriately. And like I say, for the BIAs, the real crunch for us is the city, the municipality, is our funding mechanism. But that's where it stops. From there, we are autonomous, we are independent, and we are very clear about that with all of our city staff. We don't work for you, you don't work for us. We are autonomous. You're just our funding mechanism. So there are ways to do it. There are ways to creatively fund it. And to me, the way, if you're going to do that appropriately for the chamber, then to my way of thinking, you're looking at a contribution agreement. What can the chamber deliver for the municipality that provides value for the service, that allows them to basically be a contract? That's it. That's where it ends. That would be the way you would do it, in my way of thinking. That'd be the safest and simplest way, because that contract is then bound by KPIs, and by measurables, and all those other types of things. Risk management's involved. All those pieces are already there. That, to me, is the logical way to do it. You're right.
Any other questions?
I've given you a lot.
No,
a lot of information.
That's what we're looking for. So,
Yeah.
thank you, Jeremy, for bringing your information, your expertise. We'll call it here. I think there's some people in the crowd that probably would like to chat with you.
Yeah.
And I think we will probably bend your ear a few more times as we start to move towards this. One of the big aspects of us is revitalization downtown and safety downtown. It's what we're trying to get to. And we're going to start really focusing on those agendas in the coming year. Now that we've got set up, we've got 1 year in just about.
Yeah.
So we do plan on probably getting this kind of expertise, because I still think a BIA is a strong voice to have. And as Council Ogan puts forward, all the other groups working together, everybody has their lane. I think it does well for all the businesses and getting us where we need to go. So I do appreciate it, and we will probably tap Marilyn for some of the questions that we have if we have to scoot them to you. Are we able to get your slide presentation?
You already have it.
Okay, we have it. Okay, good. Thank you.
Just remember that groups don't tend to collaborate until they're required to collaborate. So bringing them together at the table and saying, if we're all going to survive, how do we do that, is a whole new conversation. It's important. It's important to think.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
My
I appreciate
pleasure.
it. And with that, we are terminated. Thank you.